Good morning, everybody. Welcome along to today's webinar. Thank you all so much for joining us again. This is the latest in our series of Bounce Back from COVID-19. We've covered a range of topics from all different angles of data and data science. So today is a real interactive session about how you can create a data strategy, giving you the foundations you need really to bounce back from COVID-19. We're really lucky that we've got Dr. Kakia with us today, and she will be presenting the main part of the slides. But as you know, to begin with, I'm just going to tell you a little bit about us and the support you can get from our organisation, and then I'll be handing it over to the main part of the presentation. So today is brought to you by the Business and Local Government Data Research Centre, and we proudly support organisations across the UK, including the public sector, charities and businesses. So we are a team of leading experts who actually come from across the world to provide data analytics support. We're giving you data-driven solutions to some of the biggest challenges your organisation faces. We work with the research community, the public sector, charities and businesses. We have three main priority areas: methodologies and techniques in data science and artificial intelligence, local economic growth, and supporting vulnerable people. Through these main priority areas, we combine fundamental research with applied for impact that influences policy and informs practice. Since 2014, we've worked with a range of organisations, both small and large, Essex Police, the Council, and some of you here today as well. Like, I recognise some of the names of your organisations, and many, many more as well. We can help you use data effectively within your organisation. This is so important because it's changing the world around you. We can help you by providing grant-funded data analytics projects, training, webinars, workshops, challenge labs and events, as well as consultations too. So if you'd like to find out more about any of these, please contact us directly, and our contact details will be at the end of the webinar. You can also join in the conversation online. We're on social media, on Twitter and on LinkedIn. But if you want to tweet us today during this webinar and after, please do at BLG Data Research. We're a place for ideas and conversations that matter. We really want to work with you to explore data, to enhance your knowledge, and together empower society. How can we help you? One of the ways, as I said, is through grant-funded projects, and this includes the Data Analytics Innovation Vouchers, which is our way of providing support for you so you can work with researchers, including Kakia, to solve some real-world problems that your organisation is facing. So with that being said, I'm going to hand it over to Kakia. She is a renowned researcher covering many different areas, including data science and natural language processing. She pushes the boundaries, she really does, in applying research to have a real world impact. She works with a range of organisations, and I'll leave it to Kakia to really talk you through her expertise, where she works with policymakers as well as organisations to help them benefit from data. And I really hope you enjoyed today's webinar, and I look forward to hearing from you all.
Oh, fantastic introduction, Laura. Thank you so much for the kind words, and welcome everybody. Allow me 2 seconds to share my screen. Thank you for joining us. It's lovely to sort of interact with you even in this limited way. Hopefully what we have prepared for you today will give you a head start on how to create your data strategy. If you already have created one, maybe give you a couple of things to add to it, or a couple of options or areas that maybe you haven't thought yet that you might want to consider adding to your data strategy. We have some resources available for you at the end in the slides, and let me tell you that the whole webinar is being recorded, so you don't really need to take notes if you don't have to. The whole session will be available on our YouTube channel, and including links to additional resources. Today I'm hoping to very briefly talk about what we mean by data, and I'm not going to go into very much detail, but to be able to define and understand what we mean by creating a data strategy, we need to understand what we mean by data and have a kind of common starting point. And from then on, we will be talking a little bit about what a data strategy is, how it fits in the context of other strategies, why you need it. Is this something it's really worth the efforts of and the kind of the fuss? And then if you, hopefully by that point you'll be convinced that that's something useful, then giving you a few pointers on how to get started. So there will be the opportunity for questions at the end. So I'm aiming to allow for at least 15 minutes for that at the end. But as Laura said, there is a follow-up to this kind of topic in 2 weeks' time. So we have some plans about how to engage with you in between if you would like to engage with us. But also feel free to register for that to look into how to create a data audit in more detail. So what I mean by data is these data. So you might have heard of these terms: big data, structured data, unstructured data, semi-structured data, open data, real-time data, genomics data, all sorts of different fancy words to call these. But I'd like you to think very basically at the information you hold. So data can really be information and data that you might have in an Excel spreadsheet, information and text and numbers that you might store in a database or in multiple databases in your organization. It could be Word documents, but these are a little bit more difficult. We have some more sessions later during the year to sort of look into more detail how that works and how you could extract information and patterns from them. It could be sales reports, it could be feedback forms, social media, quotes and testimonials, website hits, emails, case studies, budgets, grants, business plans, and the costings included in them, projects and services you might be sort of drafting, and documentation as well. So all of this is data, and if you have at some point been involved in creating, or you've read one of them, then that's information that you could use as part of your data strategy. So data is usually at your fingertips. It could be numbers like the table I have here. It could be images. There are colleagues in the center that have used images as data, and the example is a tool that will identify if something is a cat or not a cat. So images can be used as data. It can be real-time and dynamic. So it could be tweets and social media posts that you monitor to understand how people feel about your organization and what their opinion is about a product or a service you're offering. But words can be data as well. And there have been examples where text documents have been mined to extract terms, to extract information from it, and then link it to each other. And here we're giving you an example of collaborative work between DataKind and Battle UK, where they've explored different reasons why a child might be feeling in a traumatic situation, and how it links with different types of work. And more kind of trying to bust the jargon, you might have heard about qualitative and quantitative types of data. It basically means text and stories versus numbers. Qualitative is usually narratives, text, stories. It's non-numeric. It provides good insights into experiences, behaviors, or beliefs, and answers questions such as how and why. So examples of these types of data would be if you were to conduct a focus group and take the transcripts and the interviews from that. Or it would be observations and document analysis and trying again to extract patterns from it. Other types of data would be what we call quantitative. So those would be mostly numeric data. They can be quantified and statistically analyzed. So we can draw connections between the different factors and answer questions such as what, how many, who. Examples of these are things such as surveys. So you, like the survey, for example, you'll receive at the end of this, where we would get, you get the participants to answer or choose between one or more options, and then that specific question will carry a weight. Administrative and operational data, so data that you might record as part of your operations of your organization, can also be numbers and can also be analyzed in a quantitative way. So how can data help you succeed? One way that data can help you succeed is by turning the data into knowledge, into understanding of patterns. So we have listed here some examples from our experience in the center, but also there might be many more, but we're giving you some examples here. So taking your data, understanding it and analyzing it can help you, for example, for example, enhance stakeholder engagement. So another example could be that you use artificial intelligence and machine learning techniques on your data to complement human intervention and reduce risk, manage demand, and understand your service users better. Internal data, and as I will explain shortly, bringing it all together under the same umbrella and being able to query it in an effective way can allow you to make savings and improve efficiencies. It can give you an insight about that market and the demographics of your users. Now, if that data is open, if it's available without you having to, without any restrictions to you or any fees, that can allow you to experiment and be true innovators and improve that service user experience. Finally, I mean, I'm giving you loads of examples here. You could predict future demand, identify where services are needed the most, or measure project success and various outcomes. So really the sky's the limit, so long as you understand why you're using it and what for. So an example here that we like to quote is a very big charity, Macmillan Support. They hadn't done it until then, but they used their database to understand support and motivation. So as a result, that coffee morning raised 20 million. So they sort of, their testimonial and their kind of perspective that they're sharing with us is that data made that coffee morning the biggest ever. But that was all with the help of data. Another case study involves Sussex Highway. So they worked with us to try and understand the pattern of potholes, and they were able to predict where the road will deteriorate and thus allow resources and funding to be allocated more effectively. So for them, it was time savings, understanding of where the problem will occur before it occurs, and also in the long run, better service to their citizens. So your data strategy will depend on what you define as data and possible data sources. And that's why we sort of went into it in some reminding you some of the terms there. So a data strategy is a vision for how an organization, yourselves, will collect, store, manage, share, and use the data. It could involve aligning and prioritizing what data analytics or what data analysis you might want to use for, and link them to organizational priorities. It could involve some planning. It should involve some planning if you are to bring everybody in the organization on board. But it also involves, in addition to some elements around technical aspect, it involves people, and you should never forget that, because it's about making data work for everybody and for everybody's work. So employees, staff, people who you work with need to be empowered to use the data. You need to make sure that the processes that exist already will be improved, and for all of these processes, data will be accessible. And then you need to also consider the technical aspect of it, the technology that will enable you to store, share, and analyze the data across the organization. So for us, data strategy has 4 very important components. Data, of course, because it's data strategy, but also people, process, and technology. So we will, you will see in the different steps we suggest, you will see them all intertwined and sort of being involved. But if I was to leave you with the key message, or the first key message for today is this kind of definition here, that data strategy, for your data strategy, you need to consider the data, but you also need to consider the people, the processes, and the technology that you will be using. So why should you bother? Why is a data strategy important? First of all, the role of data and the way we perceive it has been changing. So more and more organizations see data not just as something that is around and is being used for KPIs and for reporting, but should also be used as an asset. And as such, some planning and some investment in terms of how you keep it and you maintain and you look after it should be in place. Data strategy is also important because it improves data management across your organization. So you need to think of all of these times when if you could be in a small or large organization, but think of the different activities that you have, or the different departments if you were in a larger organization. How many times when you're trying to find information about something that is a specific unit is responsible for, how many times it has been very difficult because it's a domain or it's an area that another team looks after, and the two kind of teams and the two departments are not coordinated. So we call these data that exists on its own in a kind of standalone form without it talking to other data in the organization. We call that silos. So data silos are quite a challenge when you're trying to build that. And a data strategy will definitely help you identify where you are and the areas that you need to improve. So overall, if you do the exercise of creating a data strategy and agreeing on a data strategy across your organization, you'll find that it will improve the data management across all the different activities and should make things smoother as well. It's, as I said, an exercise that it needs to start, and it needs to be evolving and changing as things move forward. A strategy is also important because it will help you use your resources effectively. So whatever resources one section or one unit would be devoting on manipulating data, cleaning data, you might find after this exercise that you could join forces and make things much more effective. Help a data strategy will help you unlock the power of data across the whole organization, and you could answer you can find the data to answer questions such as, how can I measure the effectiveness of a decision or a project or an intervention or a product, if that's what you're offering rather than services? How can I predict user or customer behavior? So what will happen next? Finally, you could be in a position to answer questions such as, can I predict a product's sales or a service's use? And this is a very powerful kind of tool. Data has been proven to be a very powerful tool when you're trying to measure and understand what the future holds. So a data strategy should not be considered on its own. It's not a standalone strategy that should exist without any input and alignment with other strategies and other activities across the organization. So whenever you talk about data and how and the activities around it, you should think about, first and foremost, your business strategy, your corporate business or your charity business strategy. So the data strategy and the business strategy should align really nicely. And to be honest, as you'll see in the next slides, we suggest you start from your business strategy. So you ask yourselves, what is your business objective first, what you're trying to achieve, and then find the data that can help you say something, be it describe what the status you're in or predicting the future. Another important strategy that you need to think about when creating a data strategy is how it aligns and how it depends to your IT strategy. So in terms of your IT systems, in terms of the staff that you have, their skills, their knowledge, and so on and so forth. Finally, kind of comment from our part is that when you are in a large organization, if you create a company-wide data strategy, then it will be helpful for the units or the departments or the divisions or whatever you call them to define their own that are aligned. So what we're trying to say here is that it's easier if you start with an overarching data strategy and then define the particulars, rather than having loads of individual data strategies within different divisions and then try to align them and bring them together. So it's much harder to do that rather than starting from an overarching one and then defining the smaller ones. It's always the case because it involves people, of course. So here's a very interesting and helpful kind of visual to help us visualize how the data strategy works in the context of other strategies. I have the source there at the bottom, so you can go and have a look at the larger piece of article there if you're interested to read more into it. So the kind of last element to sort of note here before we go through the 7 steps for creating your data strategy is the overall need for either you or whoever works to create and implement a data strategy to consider this as an exercise to becoming more analytically mature. And by that, we mean with starting at the kind of left-hand side of the graph, the very first step of your journey would be to try and ask questions like what happened, try to come up with some descriptive analytics, some information, understand what happened in the past, and describe that. So as your data strategy journey moves on, you should be able to then ask some additional questions such as why did it happen? So come up with some sort of diagnostic or some cause and effect relationships between the past and why certain things happened, certain behaviors. Then the next step to show, and it's more and more difficult, of course, but it will show you, if you're able to answer that question, it will show you that you've reached the 3rd step in your maturity, in your data maturity there. So if you're able to answer questions like what will happen in the future by looking at what happened in the past and why it happened, and the so-called predictive analytics, that's again another step into your analytics journey. Finally, the very last step, and the one that shows according to that's the Gartner Analytic Ascendancy Model Scale, is the ability to answer questions such as how can we make it happen? So they call these prescriptive analytics, but that's the point where you get the most out of your data and you're able not just to say what will happen, but how you'll cause that to happen. So giving it, again, we have some links about that towards the end, but giving you some food for thought there, that your data strategy should not be just an exercise on its own. It should be aiming to make your organization, make your charity more analytically mature. So that's the kind of goal, and that's the aim. So we will be sharing some thoughts about how you could create your data strategy in 7 steps. We have summarized this as follows. You should first define your core organization and business aims. You should then conduct a data audit that will help you identify any available data and also identify any data gaps, so you'll know what you have and what you're missing, so what you need to collect or what you need to find from other data sources. Third, you need to identify the technology needs and organize your data, and I will tell you in a minute what I mean by that. It's mostly around technological infrastructure, how you store the data, where you store it, how it works. And your IT people, if you have them, or getting some help about these IT issues can also be beneficial to shaping your data strategy in a nice way. The fourth step is to, as soon as you know what you have, you know what your objectives are, to analyze your data, to try and get some insights, and then go see where you're getting with it. At this point in time, you might need to go back to finding more data. So you might need to go back to step 2 and then come back to number 4. This is an iterative process sometimes. It's not completely linear, but let's simplify it for now and hold on to that. So we analyze our data to get some insights. Then you need to consider people and processes that exist, also people and processes that you might need to engage with, or processes you might need to create to be able to accommodate and achieve your data aims. You need to develop and establish a good data governance practice. And once you have elements 1 to 6, then all you need to do is put it all together into a timeline with some roles, responsibilities, dates, resources, very much like a project plan, so that you can start implementing it. Because a strategy is a strategy, but unless it's got some elements in it that can then be actionable, then it will be just a document that will stay there without anything happening from it. So I'll go in the next maybe 5 or 6 minutes, I'll go through each one of these steps. And please feel free to put in your questions as we speak in the Q&A, if there are any questions, and we will go into them after the talk. So the first step was to define your core organization and business aims. So things to ask yourself, your colleagues, your team would be, what is your business, or what is your organization or your charity trying to accomplish? And what does success look like for you? You probably will not come up with one answer. You probably will come up with a series of answers or objectives. Do record each one of them. But the way you would implement the rest of the steps would be, for each one of these business aims, you would consider all of these steps 2 to 6 individually, and then one at a time you'll be able to come up with some ideas. So if there are, again, I'm just going to mention that again, we had a look at it before, but as a reminder, if there are any IAT or any other strategy objectives outlined anywhere else, this is the place to consider them. Do try and align them if you can, and by align I mean make sure that one feeds into each other. And more importantly, or equally as importantly as defining what your aim is, identify a champion to sponsor change. Now, if you are in a small organization where decision making is fairly easy to do and fairly quick, so there's a small team meeting, people say what they think, and then decision making is made that way, that might not be necessarily necessary, or you might be the person acting as a champion. If you belong, or if you work for a larger organization, you might find that there is a very specific way that changes like that are introduced. So you might need to understand how this decision making is made in your organization, and who would be a good sponsor to help you convince stakeholders as well as people within the company for that change. The second step would be to, as soon as you know what it is that you are trying to achieve, to conduct a data audit, as we call it. And that means basically identify what you have and what you don't have. So what available data do you have that will help you measure your performance? If you want to predict future trends, do you have that data from the past? And how often are you recording it? What it is that you're missing? If you do have data, is it of good quality? Does it cover the areas geographically, temporally, that you need to be able to do that analysis? Is it the right level of detail? So if, for example, you're trying to look into the habits of a specific neighborhood, do you have data available at that level of detail, or do you have an overarching data set that only looks at the county level data, for example? Another thing to consider is whether the data sets of the data you already hold is updated frequently enough to be able to answer the question in an effective way. So, for example, if you are trying to study the behavior of some of your users on a weekly basis and you have monthly data, that won't be possible to, you will need to find somewhere additional data, or you won't be able to answer that question. Finally, some interesting questions around that that are also around data quality is how it is measured, how it's gathered, how the data is gathered. Do you anticipate there to be loads of errors, like typing errors or other types of errors? And also, much more importantly, do you own it? Is this your data? Is this data that you have the rights to manipulate, store, and then merge with other data? Or does it belong to somebody else? So if it's yours and you have the right permissions from your users, then you can just go ahead. But if it's somebody else's, then you need to interact with them and ask for permission. We had a very good 2-day seminar last week on GDPR and issues around that. So if you would like to know more information around it, I would point you back to the recording of that. That will be available in the next couple of maybe weeks or so. The third kind of point would be identifying the technology needs and organizing your data. So we would encourage you to package the data so that it can be reused and shared along the organization. Move the data and combine it out of silos and into a central system where everybody can query it and in a compatible way, and establish all these policies that you need to be able to manage and communicate these information policies that are needed to safeguard the data. Provide rules and access guidelines for the data so that everybody in the organization knows what data exists, where they can find it, and how they can work with it. So if there are certain restrictions about certain data, communicate that to your team, to your organization, to the rest of the people that work there. I will leave that with you to sort of have a look at a later stage. But we've tried to compile a list of questions you could ask to your IT specialists around the technology needs and organization of your data. So you might want to consider things like the skills and the technical infrastructure that you need to be able to perform and achieve your data aims, to be able to get the data from the source systems in a central repository. So you don't really need to know the answer, but this is a question you might need to ask the people within your organization with IT specialization. Other elements to think about is how can, in a technical way, what sort of mechanisms will you use to provide access to the data to everybody under specific access restrictions if needed. So who will create these reports? Will IT create them for you, or will you be, or the person who's responsible for IT be creating them for you? Or can you find another way to do this so that everybody can create their own reports? So we have included here an example of how you could organize your data and why, in this example of this organization, the same client for the same kind of interaction possibly, but in different departments, has had their information slightly differently recorded. So this person here, William James Sulski, so he has 4 different IDs in 4 different systems. We're talking about the same organization. There are slight variations in his middle name, and there are some errors as well. So you see in the red line, his last name is not recorded always correctly. There's missing information in the date of birth, in the blue line, in the sales. There are different phone and contact numbers across, and depending, I guess, on when he interacted with these departments, and of course different contact addresses. Now, for a company, bringing these all together into a single data set where the same person has the correct, most up-to-date information will save time, and it will save also effort in terms of, you know, should they want to contact them again, or if the person wanted to query the service they had or the product they had received, the sales department would have been able to find more easily where they are located, who they are, what their date of birth is, and so on and so forth. And of course, I mean, you can see here that they even have different labels for each of these elements. So just as an example to show you, this is not unusual. This is what happens when this is very typical of data that we see when we work with companies and with charities and with local authorities as well. So the 5th step is to analyze your data to get insights. Again, as I said, you might need to ask for help there. What would be the best way to analyze your existing data? What additional data you might need? As Laura said, we could help you with that. But the thing to remember is that the key to the analysis as well is to allow for interaction with the data by everybody, or as many as possible, and also to be able to use the data to tell a story so that data is easier to understand and interpret. So what you really need to do to transform data into insights is to start from the raw data, be it numbers or text, and then through systems, capabilities, and culture to be able to move to a point where you can organize and analyze and use the insights for your decision making. So the first step would be collecting good quality data, of course. And we're just saying loads of different types of data that could go in. You then need to look at systems and the information, organize that information, then look at ways to analyze it to move into from raw data into some form of knowledge. You could do it yourselves. You could upskill your staff to do that for you or with you. You could outsource the analysis as well. And finally, you can use that new knowledge to improve by thus concluding your journey of transforming data into insights. So the next step would be to consider people and processes. So need to think about whether everybody that will be involved with data is skilled to use it and whether they might benefit from some training. Other things would be around processes and organizational structures. So you might find that your organizational structure might need to change slightly to accommodate these changes. So it could be as simple as, would we want analysts to be a different unit, or do we want them to sit within the different sections? All the way to, could that new knowledge help us change certain processes and improve the way we do things? The thing to remember here as well is that even if you have all the data in place and all the technology in place, if you can't convince people that this is a good thing and this is a change for the better, then you might find that the change or the shift to using data within your organization might be a bit of a challenge. So encourage employees to use data in a way that you intend them to, make them aware of why this is happening and the motivation behind having a data strategy. Finally, try and start having some discussions at this early stages about developing some information about the data you hold. So we call that the data dictionary or metadata. Getting started, because this is an ongoing process, documenting the data you have is a very, very kind of laborious process, but starting with that at this early stage will ensure that whatever you start gathering will be as consistent as possible, and any changes that happen in between, you will have a record of them. You'll also be able to record access to specific data where did that data originate? How was it transformed since I took it and downloaded it from somewhere, or since I put it together in a survey? So that will help you later on during the analysis to understand how it was transformed and how certain decisions were made. Finally, placing it all on a roadmap. So treat this after the strategy is compiled and after all this early discussion has been put together, try and treat this as a project. So create an implementation timeline, specify what will change, by when, by whom, what for, define the roles, so that people will know and sort of feel that they own a part of this change. I've just summarized this here again, just to give you an overview. So we've covered all of these 7 steps. Hopefully that has given you a kind of roadmap of the different areas you need to address, and so has broken down a little bit that made it a bit less intimidating. So we have given you in the slides a data strategy as an example. This is a draft template from an organization that looks after loads of educational data about universities. So this is an example you could also adapt to meet your needs if you need to. Be aware of barriers, of course, just as a kind of last thoughts and last comments there. Be aware of silos and siloed culture, and it's never good for data, it's never good for innovation, it's never good for other things like that. Beware of lack of data integrity and data availability. So issues with data quality might cause you a headache in the long run. It would be good to identify these as early as possible and address them. Skills gap and people are also an important kind of element to consider, and also identifying the relevant technology. So I'll leave you with a positive note. Data is changing the world, and this is your opportunity to benefit. So please get in touch if you have any questions. So this concludes today's webinar. We'll open this now to a Q&A session. Thanks very much for your contributions up to now.
Thanks so much, everyone. Thank you as well to Kakia. So I'm just going to read through some of the questions now and go through something in the chat bar. I can see that somebody's just said, can we please share a link to the template? I believe I have done that now. That was already in there. So if you want to click on that link, that will take you through to the template that Kakia was referring to and giving you a demo of in the last section of the presentation.
Sorry, Laura, I think literally just now somebody posted another one, but just to clarify, the link to the template for the HESA template, I'll post in a second, because that was slightly different. But
wonderful, thanks so much, Kakia. So let's move on to some more of the questions. We've got a wonderful question here coming in. So how do you overcome what Dietvost has called algorithm aversion. Great question there.
I'm not familiar with well, I am familiar with the term, but I'm not familiar with the reference. I guess the way forward would be, could you write some more comments about what your understanding of the term was, and then I'll try and sort of come back to it, if that's all right.
So the next question is, how does a business or organization find out what the criteria is for the data analytics innovation voucher? I can answer that one, Kakia, if you're sure. So the data analytics innovation voucher is open to any organization, could be the public sector, business, or charity who has data and is looking to solve a particular issue or analyze it for a particular purpose. You can find out more information about that on our website, as well as over on our social media channels at BLG Data Research. The current round for this funding has closed, and the next one will be open from the end of August, and we'll be doing an information webinar a bit closer to the time about how you can apply and what you need to do next. So keep following us on social media, keep coming along to our webinars, and you will find out lots more information. And in the meantime, there are some case studies and more information over on our website too. Thank you so much for that question. Another good one there coming in. The next question is, excellent presentation, thank you. My only comment is that knowledge does not create wisdom always. I think that creates capability and dynamics. Excellent point, I completely agree. But I guess it's over to the organization, and the onus is on the organization to really embed that into a culture so that the knowledge has meaning and impact. Because many people have a lot of knowledge, it's really about translating that into impact, and that's really where the wisdom comes in. Kakia, I don't know if you've got any comments there on that particular.
No, I fully agree with that. I think, well, it depends on what you define with wisdom, but I absolutely agree with that. So what we meant was exactly that. So trying to change data from something that's just numbers or text or images that hasn't got any description in terms of the patterns or that cause and effect relationships amongst the data, but turning that into something that is actionable and something that you can learn something from your or look into how or predict behavior in the future. So that's what we mean by wisdom. Absolutely, I agree with your point. Thank you.
So do we have any more questions coming in from the audience today? Any tips for overcoming barriers related to silos? Oh, excellent question there.
Oh, where to get started? We'll probably need another webinar. Talk to people. I would say that's the most important thing. So start from that, understand what data exists, and maybe understand why these data, the history of why this data has sort of evolved and has existed, was created and has since existed in a silo. The reasons probably is either because for historic reasons, these people or these departments were not talking to each other. So there were all because there wasn't the need for the data to be joined up. So I think you can evidence that need of why these two data sets could work together really nicely and could help your organization answer some good questions. Then you have their kind of good argument or positive argument for maybe overcoming that silo. But we have found from our experience that it's a combination of historic reasons, because, you know, for example, this data set existed before another data set was existed, or it's about people and politics. So consider what these barriers are, and it might help you tackle these siloed creatures, these siloed elements.
Thanks, Kakia. So do we have any more questions coming in?
Yes, I had one that I sort of said I would answer. So I was looking up as you were chatting, as you were speaking, Laura, Lawrence's question about algorithm aversion. So the I was not familiar with that, so thanks very much for bringing that to my attention. But the paper, what it does, it's basically discusses the behavior where you have to choose between human predictions or human forecasters and machine or algorithmic forecasters. And what happens is they have observed, that paper observes that the more people observe the algorithms making wrong predictions, the less likely they are to trust them. So I don't know how I can comment on it other than, so let me just go back to that question, Lawrence. Apologies, because it's not in my view.
That's fine. I can go back to that for you.
No, that's okay, I've got it, thanks. So the question was, how do you overcome that algorithm aversion? So I guess the answer to that is, how do you make humans trust algorithms? And I think hopefully, so one element of that is to make humans trust the decision-making of algorithms. So I think the answer to that would be, from my point of view, is to make everybody understand what algorithms are doing and how they make the decisions. So it used to be the case that they were very complex. They were what we call a black box. So there was some data, there was a black box, something happened in it, and out came a decision. So data analytics field has moved on a lot since then. We have been doing loads of outreach to try and explain how certain algorithms work, but also the way we document our algorithms has changed a lot. So it seems like in the field there's loads of much more documentation about how certain things operate and explaining that. But I think ultimately, because it's about people and rather than about the algorithms, I think the issue of trust is huge there. So being transparent, and if any of your decision making involves algorithmic decision making, making that obvious to your users that their data will be used in a specific way, and also that specific decisions were made or were influenced by algorithmic a prediction or algorithms in general, is a good starting point to try and sort of bring these cultures together. So hopefully that sort of addresses your question. Feel free to ask more if I haven't covered that.
Thank you, and thanks so much for the question.
Cheers. Thanks very much, Lawrence. And the paper I was looking at, in case anybody else is interested, but thanks very much for the reference. I'll also have a look at it myself at another point.
So we have another question here about, so what do you feel is one of the main data strategy objectives for the third sector for charities, so a common data strategy objective when they're looking for the third sector specifically?
I think the very first step is being willing to understand the importance of it, I would think, and understanding that data could be an asset, could help you improve and understand your service users much better. I would think from our experience, the journey with some minor variations has been very similar for charities. So again, I would start from your mission, look at what data you already have, what data you need to get, then move on to understanding how you can implement a central data set, or start implementing a central data set that will have all of these elements, and then start querying that data set and analyzing and see where you are with it. But the other thing would be, because of course in a charity you'd have less people, so it would be a smaller organization. You might find that the same person will have multiple roles. So they might be the decision maker when it comes to defining the business aims, but they could be also the person that has to make decisions about data. So hopefully this is where centers like ours can help by sort of sharing knowledge and sort of getting you up to that point where you can feel confident that you understand what data you have and how you can query it. So hopefully that sort of addressed your question. Let me know if you have any follow-up questions.
We've got lots of comments in the chat, just thanking us for an excellent webinar. So thank you all for your great feedback today and for joining us. We've just got a couple more slides advertising the webinars that we've got coming up. So I'll leave that to Kakia.
Oh, sorry. Let me share it. Sorry.
That's all right. I can do it if you prefer.
No, that's all right. I'll put it up. So that's it.
We have a number of sessions coming up on how to conduct a data audit, which is the next session coming up on the 26th of August. Then we have open source data, how and why data, open data is useful to your organization, which will be another great workshop, a virtual session to help you analyze, help you understand where you need to go to access data and how to use it effectively within your organization. Then moving on to November, we've got the visualization of data. And then in January 2021, we've got social return on investment, prove your worth using data. And we've got many more opportunities as well coming up with dates to be announced. They include, as part of the bounce back from COVID-19 series, evaluating during times of social distancing, asking the right questions to get the right answers. This is best practice in evaluation forms and impact assessment, evidencing need, and exploring your text data. So there are just a number of ways that you can benefit from working with our organisation. There's lots of other ways, workshops, webinars, training and collaborative research projects, and much, much more. And you can find out all about those over on our website, which is linked on this slide here, as well as over on social media. We're on Twitter, we're on YouTube, and we're on LinkedIn. We've already done the Q&A, so I'm going to close this webinar now. And thank you all for your time. If you've got any questions or any follow-up comments, please share them either on social media or send us a direct message, and we'll get back to you. So hopefully we'll see you in a couple of weeks' time to do your data audit. Thanks everyone, take care.